The time is 4:30 p.m. in Jerusalem. 4:30 Jerusalem time, which is a very auspicious time because the number 4:30 is the numerical value of the words Geula Shlema, which means the complete redemption. And it's very appropriate that today, in this special circumstance, that it would be this time. And 4:30 also equals misparim, which mean numbers. And the numbers are connected to the redemption in many ways. So this is the Daf for today, Menachot 21, at the top of the page, with the words Apek, Eitzim, Ve'ayal, Nesachim. It's very interesting because we're Tu B'Shvat is upon us. We're about to enter Tu B'Shvat. It's late afternoon, and then this evening, God willing, will be Tu B'Shvat. So it's interesting that we come to the words wood, which comes from trees, which is celebrated on Tu B'Shvat. So with that, Menachot 21, with the words Apek Eitzim. Apek Eitzim Ve'al Nesachim D'Tanya Aval Hayayin Ve'Adam Ve'Eitzim HaKtoires Ein Tunim Melach. The Gemara responds, wood is removed from the Braita and inserted in its place wine libations, teaching that they do not require the addition of salt, as it is taught in the Braita. But the wine libations and the blood and the wood and the incense do not require salt. Mani. I Rabbi Kasha, Eitzim, Yirabanan, Kasha Ketoeres. The Gemara asks, in accordance with whose opinion is this Braita? If you say it's in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the ruling of the Braita concerning wood is difficult, as the Braita rules that wood does not require salt, whereas Rabbi Yehuda Nasi holds that wood does require salt. If you say it is the opinion of the rabbis, the ruling of the Braita concerning incense is difficult, as they taught in the Braita on 20a, that any item for which another item is necessary requires salt, and this includes the incense, which is burned with wood. Hai Tanahu, D'Tanya Rabbi Shimon beno shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika Oimer, Ma haprat mefoirash, Davash mekabel tum'ah, Ve'ala ve'oleh liyishim, Yeshno al mizbeach hachitzon, אף כל דבר מקבל טומאה ועולה על אישים יש לו מזבח החיצון. Okay. The Gemara suggests that Braita is in accordance with this following Tana, who explains the verse that was interpreted in the Braita in a different manner. As it is taught in the Braita, Rabbi Yishmael, son of Rabbi Yochanan ben Brocha, says, the verse states, "And every meal offering of yours you shall season with salt," Leviticus 2:13. Just as the specified detail, meaning the meal offering, is an item that is susceptible to ritual impurity and is brought on the fire of the altar and is sacrificed on the external altar, so too any item that is susceptible to ritual impurity and is brought on the fire of the altar and is sacrificed on the external altar requires salting. Yatsu eitzim she'im mikavim tuma yatsu dam yain she'en oilim neishim yatsu ketoires she'en al mizbeach hachitzon. Therefore, wood is excluded as it is not susceptible to ritual impurity. Wine and blood are excluded as they are not brought on the fire of the altar, but rather are sprinkled on the corner of the altar. The incense is excluded, as it is sacrificed not on the external altar, but rather on the inner altar. אלא תמן דמתק דם עליו אחי. אבי אמינה דם ליבוי מלח. כמין מלח ונפקולי. מתואר דם דומר זעירי. אמר רבי חנינא דם שבי שלו. אינו עבר עליו, רבי יהודה אומר זעירי. Dam Shimalacho Eino Eviradav. The Gemara asks, but how can it be that, according to all opinions, the reason that blood does not require salting is that the verse excluded blood, indicating that if not for that, I would say that blood requires salt. Once one salts the blood, it exits the category of blood. As the Eri says, that Rabbi Chanina says, regard to blood that one cooked, one does not transgress the prohibition against consuming blood by drinking it, since it no longer has the status of blood that is fit to be presented on the altar. And Rabbi Yehuda says, as the Eri says, with regard to blood that one salted, one does not transgress a prohibition by drinking it, since salted blood has the status of cooked blood. Since when are you allowed to drink cooked blood? I don't get that. It says that Rabbi Yehuda says, as the Eri says, with regard to blood that was salted, one does not transgress a prohibition by drinking it, since it's salted. It's probably they salt the kosher salt. They salt the animal after it's shechted, so that the salted blood, even if you eat it, it's not bad. All right. Rabbi Yehuda didei amar evarim shitzalon v'helaon ein ba mishum reach nichoyach. And since Rabbi Yehuda himself says with regard to limbs of a burnt offering, that one first roasted and afterwards brought them up to the altar, they do not constitute fulfillment of the requirement of the verse that an offering be an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Exodus 29:25. The Gemara answers, it is still necessary to derive that blood does not require salt, lest you say that the priest should sprinkle any amount of salt, even a minute quantity, on the blood merely for the fulfillment of the mitzvah, such as any amount would not render the blood as cooked. To counter this, the verse teaches us that blood requires no application of salt. Gufa Amr Zeiri Amar Chanina Dam Shbishleino Yverav Yosif Rabbi Vikamale Amr Hashmaite Yisve Rabbi Hikva Esadam Yachalo O Shihimcha Esachelif Ugemao Chayav. Gemara discusses the matter itself. Zeiri says that Rabbi Chanina says, with regard to blood that one cooked, one does not transgress the prohibition by drinking it. Rava was sitting and saying this halacha. Abai raised an objection to him from a Braita to Sefta Kritot 219. If one curdled blood and consumed it, or in the case where one melted forbidden fat and swallowed it, even though he changed its form, he is liable. This demonstrates that even after its form is changed, the blood status remains unchanged. Lokasha. It's not a question. Kanjik babao, kanjik babachama, bao lohadal, bachama hadal. The Rava responded, this is not difficult, as here, Ziri's statement relates to a case where he curdled the blood by means of the fire, whereas there, in the case of the Braita, he curdled the blood by means of the sun. Blood curdled by means of a fire cannot return to its former state, so one is not liable, whereas blood curdled by means of the sun can return to its former state, so one is liable. Rabbi Mani Rabbi Yochanan Dam Shekaresh Yachnu Ma'u Amale Hoyun in Cheshtik. Wow. Okay. Abai objected, but even when blood is curdled by means of the sun, let us say that since it was disqualified from being presented on the altar, it was disqualified, meaning excluded from the prohibition against consuming blood. As Raimani inquired of Rabbi Yochanan with regard to blood that was congealed, and when he ate it, what is the halacha? Rabbi Yochanan responded, he is not liable, since it was disqualified from being presented on the altar. It shall be disqualified from the prohibition against consuming blood. Rava was silent and had no answer. Amar le dilma vadai kan bechatois sachitzoiniois kan bechatois apinimiois. Abai said to him, perhaps here the bride is certainly referring to the blood of the external sin offerings, which is sprinkled on the external altar in the temple courtyard, whereas Zeiri is referring to the blood of the inner sin offerings, which is sprinkled inside the sanctuary. Amar ad kartan milta dam Rav Chizda dam shekach b'chatois yachaloi chayov v'lach v'nasan Amar Raman abal kiran b'zinehu b'chatois hapinimiois v'yachalo patur v'toval v'hiza Amar Rahmanam Rava said to him, you have reminded me of a matter. As Rabbi Chizkiah says, with regard to blood that became congealed, if it is the blood of external sin offerings donated, he is liable, as the merciful one states in the Torah. And the priest shall take of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and place it upon the corners of the altar of the burnt offering, Leviticus 4:25, and congealed blood is suitable for taking and placing, as one can take the congealed blood and place it upon the altar. By contrast, if it is blood of the inner sin offerings, and one ate it, he is exempt, as the merciful one states in the Torah. And the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle of the blood, Leviticus 4:6. And this congealed blood is not suitable for dipping and sprinkling. Rava. So I'm going to have to put this on pause for a moment. It's losing some battery power. Okay, we're back. And where are we holding? Rava was silent, had no answer. We did that. I remember saying Rava was silent and had no answer. So I'll just go back to there. So Amrle Dumavade kan mechatois chitzoiniois kan mechatois venimiois. Right, I said that too. Abai said to him, perhaps here is the Braita certainly is referring to the blood of the external sin offerings, which is sprinkled on the external altar in the temple courtyard, whereas there is the Eri is referring to the blood of the inner sin offerings, which is sprinkled inside the sanctuary. Inside the sanctuary. Amar adikartan. Adikartan means the Rav Chizda. Dam shikorash yichatois. Yachloi chayv l'chayv l'asanu rachman. Balakichan nesinahu b'chatois v'nimyois yachlo. Pato v'achal v'hiza am rachmana. V'haylav bar tivila b'azayu. Rava said to him, you have reminded me of a matter. As Rabbi Chizda says with regard to blood that became congealed, if it is blood of external sin offerings and one ate it, he is liable, as the merciful one states in the Torah. And the priest shall take of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and place it upon the corners of the altar of the burnt offering, Leviticus 4:25. And congealed blood is suitable for taking and placing, as one can take the congealed blood and place it upon the altar. But by contrast, if it is blood of the inner sin offerings and one ate it, he is exempt. As the merciful one states in the Torah, and the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle of the blood, Leviticus 4:6. And this congealed blood is not suitable for dipping and sprinkling. Amar Rav Papa hilkach dam chamo shekach shuach lo chayav roy leknegdo roy yichatois hachitzoinus. And Rava himself says, even if there was blood of the inner sin offerings, and one ate it, he is liable, since blood corresponding to this blood is suitable to be placed on the altar in the case of the external sin offerings. Where Papa says, therefore, according to the same reasoning, in the case of the blood of a donkey that became congealed and one ate it, he is liable, despite the fact that a donkey's blood is not fit to be brought as an offering, since blood corresponding to this blood is suitable to be placed on the altar in the case of the external sin offerings. Amar Rav Gidal, Amar Zeiri, Dam ben lach ben yavesh choitzitz, meis v'adam v'hadayoi v'advash, v'acholo v'veishin choitzitzin lach inenon choitzitzin lo ikashya, hadi sorech, hadi lo yisorech. In the context of the halacha of blood, Rav Gidal says it's Erie says blood, whether moist or dry, interposes during ritual immersion. The Gemara raises an objection from a Braita, Tosefta Mikvaot 6.9, with regard to blood, ink, honey, or milk on a person's skin. When they are dry, they interpose during immersion, but when they are moist, they do not interpose. The Gemara explains this is not difficult. This statement of Rav Gidal is referring to a case where the blood adheres to the skin, as it has begun to congeal and therefore interposes. That Braita is referring to a case where the blood did not adhere and therefore is not interposed. Timlach Limayoso Timlach Lichiditanya Melach Yachol Tivoneu Tam Lomar Timlach O Timlach Yachol B'melach Tam Lomar B'melach. The Gemara returns to its interpretation of the verse, and every meal offering of yours you shall season with salt, Leviticus 2:13, and asks, for what purpose does the expression "you shall season" come? The Gemara answers, it is written for that which is taught. Braita had the verse stated only, at every meal offering of yours shall you with salt, one might have thought that the halacha is tivonehu, a term that will be explained in the Gemara. Therefore, the verse states, "You shall season." Conversely, had the verse stated only, "You shall season," one might have thought that this obligation can be fulfilled by means of adding salt water. Therefore, the verse states with salt. Lo tashbis melach. Velo tashbis melach. Melach shidam shveves ve'ezezo. Melach sedomis. U'inashim lo matzu melach sedomis. Shemevi melach istro konis. Istrakonis Tam Lomar Takriv Koshu Takriv Kobakum Takriv Afilu Bishabas Takriv Afilu Betuma. The continuation of the verse, and you shall not omit salt from your meal offering, teaches that one should bring salt that never rests. Means it is found continuously. What type of salt is this? This is referring to the salt of Sodom, Melach Sedomis. And from where is it derived? That if one did not find the salt of Sodom, that he should bring the salt of Istrokanit, Istragonis, which is quarried from rock. The verse states immediately afterward, with all your offerings you shall sacrifice salt. Leviticus 2:13, in order to emphasize that you should sacrifice any type of salt. You should sacrifice salt from any place, even from a location outside of Eretz Israel. You should sacrifice salt even on Shabbat, and you should sacrifice salt even in a state of ritual impurity. My tivonehu, Omar Rabba Balula, Hachi Kama Yochon Diboinu Kiteven Betit, Omar Lebaya Yachi Diboinu Boile, El Omar Lebaya, Yachol Yasenu Givinyan Amale Rabba, Ihachi Yonenu Diboile, El Omar Rabba, Yachol Tivonehu. The Gemara clarifies what is the meaning of the term tivonehu. Rabba Bar Ula says this is what the Braita is saying. One might have thought that one should mix into it large quantities of salt, just as one mixes straw into clay. Abai said to him, if so, the Braita should have said Yitabonenu. Yit bonenu, not tivonenu. Rather, Abaye said, the Braita is saying that one might have thought that one should form the addition of salt just as one builds a building, a binyan, by adding layer upon layer. Rava said to him, if so, the Braita should have said he should build it yivinenu, not tivonenu. Rather, Rava said the Braita states one might have thought tivonehu. My tivonehu, Ravashi yachol yitain botam kivina. Tam lomar timlach ketzad hu oseh maybe ha'avel v'nosin alav melach chozer havcho v'nosin alav melach u'malin. The Gemara asks, what is meant by tivonehu? Rashi said one might have thought that one should infuse the entire offering with a taste of salt, just as understanding bina infuses a person with wisdom. To counter this, the verse states, you shall season. How does he act? He brings a limb that is to be sacrificed on the altar and applies salt, and then turns it over and again applies salt and brings it up to the altar. Amar Abaye says, and one acts similarly before placing meat into a pot. If one wishes to cook meat and needs to salt it in order to extract its blood, it is sufficient to apply salt to both sides and let it sit until the blood drains. Then, after it is washed, the meat is ready to be cooked and eaten.